welcome to Creative Block. We're your hosts, V.
And Sean. We interview people in the creative industries about their life, work, and hobbies while we doodle jam.
We asked people on our social medias if they had specific topics they wanted us to discuss, as well as some drawing prompts.
Today we have with us Jennie Gyllblad. Is it okay if I call you Jenny?
That is
for the
absolutely
purposes
fine.
of this podcast?
You can call me Jen as well.
Jen?
A lot of people
Okay.
just call me Jen. It's totally fine.
Well, we're so happy to have you on. Right now, you're in the middle of an awesome Kickstarter campaign with a really interesting project, and we want you to tell everyone about it. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for actually having me on.
Hey.
I know there's probably a little bit awkward because I'm drawing traditionally and we had to sit and try to make this work. So thank you for going through that, to have me on. So thank you for that.
It
First
did
of
not
all.
take longer than 15 minutes. It is
Yeah.
okay.
I was just trying to get all of the cameras and everything to work, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing at the same time. I'll try to keep up, but they're already off. Oh my god! But yeah, so my name is Jen, and basically I am currently doing a Kickstarter about my grandmother and her life in northern Sweden during World War II. So it's very different from what I normally do. But that's basically what I'm currently up to, and has been quite interesting to see people's responses to it,
Well,
considering what my
Yeah.
normal work is.
it's
go
quite
ahead.
a tonal shift. Yeah.
Yeah,
It is.
I'm so excited to hear about that because, like, I know from watching your videos, because for everybody, like, listening to this interview, Jenny, you also do broadcasts on Twitch a lot, and you regularly put out YouTube videos, right?
I do. I mean, I try to because basically making comics is my job. So trying to get the time to do everything is quite something. So whenever I have the time, I do some YouTube videos, like just for fun. And it's just a nice way for me to just sit and talk a lot because I love talking. So, and also I
Nice.
just, so you're probably going to have to like shut me up a lot, but
Yeah, that's why
Yeah,
we
I
get
just-
people to come on our podcast to shut them up.
yeah, to just be like quiet and awkward. But yeah, I just love talking, and I especially just love talking about working in comics. So I thought that why don't I just ramble on YouTube about it? And for some reason, when you complain about a lot of stuff, people love listening to that
They
shit.
love it. So we talked a
Love
little
it.
bit about the drastic turn that you took, like with this new comic, and a lot of people get kind of stuck in one genre or pigeonholed, and you were taking a leap here, doing a different genre. Can you talk a little bit about the type of comics you've done before this historical comic that you're going to be working on?
Right. Okay. So normally I make a whole bunch of comics. Okay. So I normally make like, horror comics and fantasy comics and space opera comics. And the most recent one is a cyberpunk comic. But let's be honest, the most popular stuff I do is porn comics. So I basically draw a whole bunch of smut, and that's the kind of the stuff that earns me the money. And then I get to draw all of my other stuff on the side. That also, like, it still earns me a little bit, but not even close to what smut gets me. So I'm used to just drawing a whole bunch of like tits and ass, and everything is like, lots of like kink stuff and, monsters and that kind of thing. So going from that over to a literal like real world event, which is like very, very sensitive, and it's about my actual grandmother from like northern Sweden. The actual tonal shift is kind of, it's difficult, but also I think probably quite healthy. Because when I've started working on the thing with Granny, it is so difficult to like literally read. I'm going to tell you more about like what it actually is, but basically sit there and reading all of her diaries and stuff, which has a lot of things about you know, the Nazis and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, refugee children and things burning and stuff. And it's all very heavy, heavy things. To be able to take that and then just kind of put that aside and just go and draw people having a good time with their asses out. It's just very nice just to have that kind of break from the
Right.
misery, you know? So like it's been actually really lovely. But I was kind of nervous that I wasn't gonna like people weren't gonna be interested in it because people kind of like my stuff for the tits, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
to be able to kind of go, hey, so I know that you've been following my stuff because I draw lots of boobs, but do you fancy reading a comic about war crimes instead? And like, how do you pitch that to people?
Well, can we, before we get too far into the Kickstarter stuff, I'd love to get sort of a background of how you got into making comics professionally, kickstarting comics, like what drew you to the type of comics that you draw. Did you do stuff before you drew hentai, or did you was that immediately like we're going there?
I mean, I've always been drawing comic books. So ever since I was a kid, I was always drawing like little stories and stuff like that. So it's always been something I've been doing. And funnily enough, because my granny was an artist as well, and she was always encouraging me to do art whenever I was in the summer house with her. So up in the northern part of Sweden, we would always like she would be doing tapestry art and stuff, and I would be drawing comic books. So I've got all of these like old comics, like really, really bad stuff, okay, where I am just drawing like her doing stuff in the house or whatever. So I've always been doing it, but I never really thought that you could actually do it as a job. So I wanted to go to a special what's it called? By the way, because I am from Sweden, I had to like when I went to like school and stuff, I went to school in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know what this is called in English, but there is a particular when you go to high school in Sweden, you get to choose like what kind of specialty you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in Sweden, there's a type of specialty that's called estetiska linjen, which is basically where all the creative weirdos go, just to like do a lot more art stuff. So I wanted to go and do that because I wanted to make more art. But like my family and people around me basically kind of said, you can't really do art as a job. Can we just try to be a bit more sensible? So I went to a more sensible thing of like social studies and languages, just so I could get all the qualifications necessary to go to university. So even from the beginning, it was just like you can't do art for a living. Like that's not a job. Like illustrations are not like a thing.
Yeah.
So it was only when I moved over to the UK when I was 19 that a friend of mine basically saw my drawings and they were like, have you thought about going to university for like illustration? And I was like, wait, you can do that? Because like I didn't think that this could be like a thing that you can do properly. So
How did you end up in the UK at 19?
oh my God. Okay, to keep a very long story short, basically I met a boy over World of Warcraft when I was a child.
Yeah. Oh man.
I know. Look, I was in northern Sweden. I was like a nerd on a computer on my own, and I was just like, oh, I just wanna be like on the internet all the time because I'm cool. And I got
so many
addicted to World
listeners.
of Warcraft.
There's so many listeners that are like thumping their desks, like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Video games are women.
Honestly, as artists, I don't know. I don't know what it is about the internet, but as artists, or maybe it's because we're just kind of like more like far between, like few and far between, so that we will kind of look for community online. But I feel like a lot of artists were kind of drawn to online communities.
Yeah, definitely. And I did feel a little bit like I didn't really fit in anywhere. And I was always like into creating like worlds and stuff. So I started doing like role playing a lot of the time. So I did like pen and paper role playing with my friends. And then I also did don't judge me, but like I did the role-playing servers in World of Warcraft.
There we
So
go.
I was part of like the beta testers for like the role-playing people.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I met a guy, and at 19. Keep in mind, at this point, I have never been abroad. I have never done anything. The longest like distance I've traveled, I think, was down to Stockholm, which was a far, far away land, basically. And then I basically went to my parents and I was like, I have found a boy on the internet. I want to go there. And my parents were like, no, you're fucking crazy. You're not doing that. Then they got to see like him on a webcam, and they got all of these like assurances that, you know, this is his address, these are all the phone numbers, etc., etc., and you need to call us constantly to make sure that you're not being kidnapped. And then they, you know, let me go. I was there for 2 weeks, and I discovered a land called London, where there is 24-hour open like places where you can go and buy pie whenever you want to. Things don't close, which is just like, to me, it was a huge like culture shock. I was like, what the hell? So after 2 weeks, I came back and I was like, I'm moving to London. And my parents were like, no. But then for some reason, they let me do it. Maybe they just wanted me to be out of the house at this point. I don't know.
Do you think that grinding in World of Warcraft has helped you with the indie grind?
Oh my God! Don't say that. But yeah, probably. One of my friends in World of Warcraft literally got called out for potentially being a bot because they thought that his moves were too repetitive, but he was just a guy.
Oh my
so those
God.
are the kind of friends I had.
Oh my God, that is so funny.
Did you have a main character that you played in World of Warcraft? What did you
God,
play?
this is bringing back so many memories.
I want to draw your guy.
Right,
or
okay,
can
so
you
I
draw
was a
your
troll.
guy?
I can draw my guy, yeah, of course. Oh God, can I remember? Okay, so yeah, I was a troll. And my name was, okay, again, don't judge me. My name was Genji.
There we go.
Oh my God, that is cute though.
Creative.
Of course it was, because I am so good with names, guys. I'm so good. But yes, I was a troll and I was a mage. This was so long ago. I'm trying to what was my hair do? What were my tusks? You could have so many different types of tusks. I don't know.
That is so
But yeah,
funny.
it was quite something. And then obviously it all turned to raiding and all of that stuff, and like World of Warcraft kind of became a job. And I was like, no, I'm not in it for the job. I'm here to role play. What are you doing? So at that point I quit it. But yeah. And also, by the way, later on, I also kind of split up with the guy, and now I am married to another man. Just so you don't think that
okay,
it's the
so
same guy.
it wasn't a through line, like completely romantic story that has led up to
No.
today. Yeah,
Then we
yeah.
split up, and I basically ended up in like a mold infested flat in apartment. That flat is British in a city in the UK, where I was like in a basement flat where literal mushrooms were growing out of the walls.
Wow.
And when I was 30 years old, and I basically had to start over from scratch. And my parents were like, do you want to move back to Sweden? Because clearly this UK thing isn't working out. And obviously they were really worried for me. But I was like, no, I'm going to make comic books for a living. Just you fucking watch. Just you wait.
You know, that's funny because I have like a lot of I don't know, I relate to a lot of the things that you're saying. My parents also weren't like really into me pursuing art, and there was a moment when I also kind of like there was I'm French. We moved to the US, and then I moved back to France a little earlier than my parents to kind of like pursue art school. And there's like a little bit of this thing where it's like, okay, well, I'm on my own and nobody can tell me what to do.
Exactly. This is me. I'm going to find my own identity.
Yeah. That is so cool that you picked comics though, because I feel like for me, I had been discouraged multiple times, not just by my parents, but also when I went to like comics like festivals and stuff. I would try to talk to like comics like authors, and they would be like, don't do it, kid, don't do it. too
Oh,
hard.
yeah. So like the thing with like you have to keep in mind that when people are saying that, and also a lot of the times when family members are saying it, if the family is nice, they're doing it because they're trying to protect you because
Yes,
they
yes.
know that it is hard. And basically, oh my God, sorry, I just noticed what you were doing on the on the jam. Oh my God.
This is you.
That's incredible. Oh, we have to talk about trolls more in a bit because that's also part of Nordic folklore. Anyway,
Hey.
but yeah, when it comes to like making comics as a job, yeah, there are going to be people who constantly tell you not to do it, because it is so hard, and like there are like phrases that come up over and over again, which is just like comics will break your heart. Comics is an industry that eats its young, which is true. Comics has a ceiling, so you will find a lot of young people get into comic books. By the way, I'm saying all this like don't get discouraged, okay? I'm gonna be a little bit negative, but like clearly I am making comic books and I'm almost 40 years old, okay? So but like comics kind of people get into it when they're quite young, and then they realize that there seems to be a ceiling to it in terms of how much you can advance and how much you can earn from it. So you grind and grind when you're very young, and at that point you can, because again you're young. And then you come to a point where you're just like, at which point is it going to get easier for me? And then you kind of go, oh, how am I going to get a retirement out of this? And you start thinking about those things because you're getting on in life. And like, I want to have children, maybe. I mean, I don't personally, but like, maybe you want to have kids. Maybe you have other things going on that involves, you not being able to work all the time. So a lot of the time when industry professionals tell you like, oh God, don't do comics, kids, it's just because they're like, they're not trying to be like, oh, you can't handle it. It's more like, it's very difficult. So please don't feel like it's you. If you find it just a bit too much, it's not your fault. Like the industry itself is chronically underfunded, shall we say? And comic book artists are so underpaid that it's actually quite funny. Like, so it comes to a point, like we're so far down, like the totem pole, whatever you call it, that like I started joking and saying that I'm like down in the gutter level of comics because I am not published. I am self-published, and I have been self-published for a decade. I have no one. I don't even have an agent. It's just me. So it's just like I'm in the gutter levels. I don't even have those codes on the back of my books yet. What are they called again? ISBN codes? Yeah. My next job for myself is to try to get ISBN codes. That's how fucked I am.
But I love that you're making it work though, and I think that's really inspiring. And it shows that like you can make a living doing comics without being like traditionally published.
Yeah.
Have you thought about putting ISBN codes that are not real to make your comic look as if it has ISBN codes?
Oh my God.
Just bootleg.
Yeah, bootleg it. Or maybe I should do that. Just make myself look legit.
Yeah, who's actually scanning those things? I don't know.
You're giving me ideas now.
Oh. No, that's awesome, and I feel like anytime someone gives you advice like that, like they're not trying to crush your dreams necessarily. They're trying to. I mean, sometimes it's kind of like a test. Like, does this person actually like it enough to really make it and be consistent? Like, do you love it enough to suffer? And they're probably also like mourning you a little bit, like, oh man, it's gonna be rough, little guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but at the same time, you have to also be careful because just as like an example, I'm one of the founders of the AOCC, which is the Association of Comic Creators. And basically we just went to the university in Leeds, which has a comic book like university degree that you can do now, because that's like a thing now. And we were talking to students there, and I noticed like the complete opposite. Instead of people kind of going, yeah, I'm going to go and make comic books, you had people basically going, there's no way I can make comic books. It's too hard and I'm too scared. And you had these people who...
But they're in the major?
So, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting, huh?
Whoa.
Yeah, and I
Mm.
was there kind of going, okay, so this is the complete opposite, where you have these incredibly talented people. Like the people who are creating comic books now, like the young people,
Hmm.
they are like out of this world, like good. They are so good, and they are so terrified. Like some of the people I talked to, they were just like, I'm scared of being on the internet. I'm scared of social media. I don't know how to put myself out there. I can't handle it. I don't know where to go. Everything feels so floaty and bad. And and they were basically like, I feel like I just want to give up. And they hadn't even graduated. And I'm like,
I think
oh
that's
shit.
really interesting that you bring all of that up because I think all of these are like real fears, and it's something
Yeah.
that I've noticed also happening on the animation side. Like I personally went into animation because I got a little bit spooked, like these students by the kind of like doom talk around comics. So I was like, I'll go into animation because it's a little bit more stable.
Hmm.
It's a little bit of a weird time for animation right now. I've even this kind of space is also getting the youth being scared of it
Right,
because
right.
Yeah.
of all these the same fears. How do you talk to students when they come to you guys with these kind of fears?
Well, I mean, the first thing I always kind of say is that like, well, I mean, people have basically asked me for a video on it. Like that I am gonna be making a YouTube video that I have had like in my drafts for ages, called like the Indie Comic Survival Guide, that is just gonna go
Oh,
through all of
yeah.
this. It's just that every time I sit down to do it, something changes and I have to scrap the bits, especially with platforms.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I tend to kind of say to people is that like, you know, you need to, it's gonna sound really arty-farty, but like you need to remember like why you want to do this in the first place.
Right.
Like, what do you love about making comic books? Like, if you enjoy it, like make sure that you remember that enjoyment. So don't like, if things are starting to destroy the enjoyment for you, then is it really worth it? So a lot of the time, people, if people really, really love making comic books, sometimes, and this is also gonna, I don't want this to be like a, a discouraging
No,
thing
we'll
to say, but
balance it
like,
out. You're good. You're
yeah,
good.
yeah, but like I sometimes I feel like you can keep that joy in making comic books by having it still be either a part-time thing that you do because you'll have less pressure, or just like having it as a hobby is entirely valid.
Sure.
You don't have to stress to make this a thing, because like I personally have made this a full-time job, and I do talk about that a lot, but it has come with a lot of things that I've had to give up as a result. And you have to kind of sit with yourself and think about like, what am I willing to like do to have this be my career? Why am I
Right.
so set on this being my career? Or can I just make it as like a fun thing, maybe as a part-time thing, maybe as a hobby, and then if it then turns into more of an actual thing more organically, that's good, but not going into it being like, it must become a thing, otherwise
Mm,
I'm screwed.
It yeah,
yeah.
it's such a mind fuck because like and it's hard advice to give because
Yes.
really the answer is like the people that get hired the most or make it are the people that would be doing this thing forever even if no one was paying them.
Yep.
Yes.
Those
Hmm.
are the people
Absolutely.
that get truly good at the thing, and also those are the people that when you read their stuff it doesn't stink of desperation necessarily. Like there's a certain like, please, I'm trying so hard to be the best thing possible. Every page is a portfolio piece. Like please
Yeah.
hire me,
Well,
whatever.
this is what I say, that like that it's, I wouldn't do this if I didn't love it. Like I could be making just like illustration stuff and I would earn a lot more. Like I actually opened up my commissions a couple of months ago. I've closed them again, but like I opened them up for a bit, and the money I was earning for a single piece was 4 times more than what I would earn for that same size comic page. So like in terms of just money, if you want to be rich or something, do not go into comics. Like if you want to like be rolling in the money, don't become a comic book creator. That's not smart. But like I think that if you have to constantly balance like your enjoyment with it and the money side. So I constantly have to think about this, because if I get too stressed, I'm just like, but okay, you could be doing something else then if this is too much for you. Because like I keep on thinking about the things like the reason that I am able to do this as a job, and as I said, I have been working in comics now for a decade, is because of many things that I don't do as a result. Like I'm in the UK for starters, so like I don't have to think about health insurance for now. Save the NHS. And I don't drive, so I don't have a driver's license. I don't have a car. That's no cost for me. I don't have to go anywhere. I have no kids, and I'm not planning on having children, because that's another cost, and I mean that's not really an interest for us. The only like dependent I have is like one elderly dog. I don't travel. Like I'm incredibly boring. I don't travel. I don't go and do other crazy things. Like I'm a homebody. I sit at home. I play video games. I stream on Twitch. I read comics, and I draw stuff. And sometimes I go into town and like drink beer. Like that's basically my life. And for some people, that is going to be so boring.
There's a lot of
like,
drinking on Jenny's stream.
Yeah.
It is part of the stream. It seems it's good.
It happens. It does happen sometimes. So yeah, so you have to kind of think about the fact that like it works for me, but it's also because of all of these other reasons around it, and also the fact that I do certain things. I mean, all of this. I promise I'm gonna make that video. But all of this is like in combination with like how I use the internet, how I schedule myself, how I charge for my work, where I get my money from, how I go to Comic Cons, and where I go in real life. Because trust me, you can't just be on the internet. You also need to like be somewhere in the world, like outside.
No.
No. So yeah, there's lots of that kind of stuff as well that you can think about.
That's so. It's just like, can you kind of talk a little bit about how you figured out this like schedule, and was it through your comics community? Was it like a lot of trial and error kind of?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. So
we're going to be getting into some bullet journaling, aren't we?
Oh hell yeah. So basically this is way before I realized that I have ADHD, and I was completely like I only got diagnosed a few months ago, and I'm 38. So I've gone my entire life completely undiagnosed, just raw dogging it, man. I don't have meds, no nothing. So I was always like a bit like, why do I find timekeeping so difficult? Why does time just disappear for me? What's happening? So the way I started off was by timing my work. So this is like in the very, very beginning, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I would time how long it takes me to do a comic book, to do a comic page from scratch. So I will sit there and I will check how long it takes me to do pencil, how long it takes me to do the ink, the painting, and then the lettering and all of that stuff. And then I will add all of that time together and take the national minimum wage in the UK, which at that point I believe was £9. I think it's gone up to 10 or 11 now. I'm not sure. But I would take that and I would say I would, do the maths. And then I would be like, okay, this is how much I should be charging per page at a minimum. We're talking minimum wage here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I figured out like how long can my comics take to make, and if I am working with other people, how much should I charge them per page. And the whole per page thing is really important, because if you are working solo or working indie, you are in the indie scene with a bunch of other people who are all equally broke. Okay. So you're not going to find anyone in the indie scene who just goes, yeah, I'll pay you for a whole comic in one go. No problem. Here, have £10,000 or something like that. It's just in my account. Like it doesn't happen. So the way I survived was by charging people per page. So they would send me a script, and then I would send an invoice, half up front, half when it was done. This is trial and error, because when I didn't do that, sometimes the money just wouldn't come in. And then you're sitting there and you're like, I can't afford to eat right now, so I'm going to eat baked beans from a can. So you just learn like the hard way. Money up front. So half of the cost up front. This little pen does not touch the paper until I have some money in my account. I have to be harsh like that. And I'm timing myself and then scheduling things like quite harshly so that I know how many pages I have to get done per month to survive. And that's literally how I started everything. And then obviously, you know, things like Patreon entered the chat, Kickstarter entered the chat, and then all of that stuff. And, you know, that became a lot more complicated and also lovely. But, you know, I can ramble on about that if you want to hear.
No, that's really cool to hear, because I think these are some great tips for anyone who's looking to even do maybe like commissions, you know?
Yes.
Like, do you also do that for commissions, the half up front, timing and hard deadline?
Yes, absolutely. So what I do is that I first of all, I chat with the people. We all see what we want and we all agree on everything up front over email. And then I will invoice them for the half of the cost. Sometimes they pay me everything up front and I'm like, ugh. But most of the time they pay me like half up front. Then I show them each stage over email and we do all that stuff, you know, backwards and forwards. And then when they're happy and everything is done, I send them the invoice for the last bit. Don't send them the original. Don't send them like the big file or anything until they have paid that last invoice. So you have the finished piece, you're showing it to them, but you're not giving them the big files. You're not giving them the original painting until that last bit of money has hit your account. You have to be kind of ruthless like that, but also in a polite way. So you always let them know at the very beginning when you're having that negotiation that that's how it is. And people love that. They love actually just knowing what's going on, because a lot of the time, I don't think that people know that it's quite scary for someone to commission art. People don't really know how to commission art. How do I talk to an artist? What am I gonna do? So like it's very nice for them to just know where the boundaries are and where the rules are for this artist and stuff. So yeah, absolutely. I do upfront and then when it's done. And that's how it's worked for me. And that way I am able to like pay my bills, because I know of people in the industry who work for publishers that I'm not going to mention, but they have been waiting for their paycheck in comics for 6 months or more.
Oh my
So they
God.
have finished all of their work and they don't get paid for months. Like I can't do that.
And you're just
Literally,
held
I can't afford
hostage
that.
by these people. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't do that. I have to pay like for food. I have to pay electricity. So that's another reason why I don't work with publishers, you know, yet, unless someone approaches me with a very, very good deal. But I don't think that they will. But like, it's because I can't afford to take that risk that I'm going to do a bunch of work for someone and then I won't get paid for half a year. Like that to me is insane. So
no, that's very true, because I feel like as artists, that's something that we face a lot in terms of like people, I don't know, they forget to pay us. They're like, oh, you were missing all this paperwork, or like just kind of especially
I'm sure you were.
I mean, even companies are like this, because then like it gets just lost in the different departments in the payroll department. Like the invoice is like, we'll pay you within 30 days. And then they're like on day like 31, you get the thing maybe, or you have to remind them. Yeah. I mean, that kind of thing
you
happens all
always
the
have
time.
to remind them.
Right. Dude, it's ridiculous. Well, so I think that's actually a pretty good segue into using Kickstarter as a way to facilitate and budget out how you do comics. When did you first start using Kickstarter, and what's your journey been like so far over, like, you know, did you have projects that didn't work out with Kickstarter? Did you have, like talk a little bit about the start of that maybe?
Oh, right. Okay. So my beginning journey, shall we say, with Kickstarter was, I mean, if you can believe it, it was smut. It was hentai. It was porn. So I did my first solo Kickstarter for my first little genitals book in 2016. I can't actually remember exactly when it was, but I think it was around 2016. And it was just me kind of dipping my toe in to see if people were interested. So I had already done 4 pages of like this very, very short little smut comic about the absinthe fairy having her way with a punter, shall we say, who didn't respect her. So there's a bit of like femdom and things like that. And I wasn't sure whether people wanted to actually read my smut. So I've always, like, as I said earlier, like I've always been drawing comics. And, when I got a bit older, I'd started drawing spicy comics just for myself because, it's fun. But I didn't think that people would actually be interested in my stuff, not in that way. So my first Kickstarter was just literally to do, like, I think a few more pages of this particular genitals comic. And these are like small pages as well. Like it's not complicated things. And like it's not really like a big plot of, complicated, amazing stories. It's just an excuse for people to bone, essentially. But I was shocked just by the number of people who just went, yeah, we'll have some of that. And I think one of the reasons was, first of all, it's smut. People will pay for smut. And second of all, I think because I was painting and drawing traditionally, that made people interested because it might be a little bit unusual, maybe. And also kind of my style has been described as like, oh God, retro anime European comics. Like
Interesting.
In like a mixture between retro manga and retro European. And I'm just like, I'm retro? No.
That is so funny because I see the nostalgic appeal of it where it's like, oh, it's like I discovered this ancient comic that nobody's talked about kind of thing.
Exactly.
Like an archaeologist.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh.
Oh, what is this?
That's
This is
so funny.
traditionally drawn tits? Oh, it's like finding like this is a very UK thing. So I don't know if this exists in like in America, but
That is so funny. It is kind of punk in a way.
I can
Yeah, but
see the individual scratches of the ink on the tits.
oh hell yeah! Like in the UK, there was a thing before the internet where they would leave porn magazines in bushes.
Oh,
And then they would like people would just go into the porn bush to look at porn. And the UK is a weird place, okay? And I feel
I mean, that
like
sounds like a myth.
funny.
That sounds like something
no, it's
that
real. I promise
kids
you.
on a playground would make up to try to like prank each other. Like, yeah, my older
I
brother
swear-
buried a stack of Playboys under
I
the
swear
playground.
it's real. British people are hilarious. So like that's a thing that happened here. And I think finding kind of retro smut was kind of what made people interested because it was like, oh my goodness, look at this. It looks old.
It's been in a bush.
It's been in a bush.
Do you know if that's affected the demographic of your fan base? Do you have older fans? Do you know?
You know what? When I told my parents that I was drawing smut, because obviously I had to tell them. My parent, first of all, my mum was just like, "What are you doing? You're drawing porn?" And I was like, "Yeah." And my dad was like, "Okay. And how much are you earning from that?" And I showed them my first Kickstarter, and my dad was like, "You keep drawing porn, my
You
daughter.
keep doing
You
it.
keep doing that." So like.
That is so funny.
That
So
is
like
very
I
funny.
think that I've actually been looking at the analytics now a bit more, and also when I send out parcels, obviously I have to write out a lot of the names of the people when I post Kickstarter rewards, and there is almost like like there's quite a healthy balance between like the different genders. So like you'd think that it would be like, at least my parents were just like, isn't it just dirty old men who read that? And I'm like,
dirty old
actually
women
no.
too.
There's dirty women too. There's dirty people of all sorts. Trust me.
That is
So yeah,
funny.
but I have noticed that there are actually, I feel like people start like in, well, at least for my work, it seems to be people like 30 plus. So I do seem to be catering to kind of my age demographic. So I think that if younger people came across my porn, they would probably think it was pretty cringe. I don't know.
I think that's actually really interesting you bring that up, because I was talking to a friend of mine who also like does sometimes Patreon, like she does Patreon, but also sometimes Kickstarters. And the thing is that like you can't, I feel like as a consumer, you can't really afford to pay for art before you're 25 or 30 just because of like income. So it does kind of make sense. And like the nature of like porn or whatever, like you have to be at least over 21. So in a sense, you're kind of like your demographic is already more stable in terms of like the money they can afford to spend.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's kind of like a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, the fact that I draw for adults means that it's easier, I think, it's probably easier for me to make a living because the people will just straight up buy my stuff. And they've also got like a quite an adult understanding of what it takes to make the art. And if they don't, I will keep on drilling it into people's minds, just how hard it is to make art, that this doesn't just magically appear. Like this takes effort and skill. Even these crappy little things. But like, yeah, so I think that is one good thing. But the bad thing is, and don't worry, I am gonna make a video about this too at some point in our time. The bad thing is that when you're trying to draw smut, it doesn't even have to be like really crazy smut, just anything now that has a bit of nudity in it, and try to sell it on the internet. It's becoming more and more difficult to actually even be able to sell it.
I've had Stripe cancel their payment system on my Big Cartel because there was a wiener in one of my drawings.
No way.
Yeah, so
only PayPal. I'm not even surprised. I'm infuriated for you.
Only PayPal is
that is crazy. I actually did not know about that, because I haven't, I've thought about doing erotic comics, because every artist, I think at some point we're like, that would be fun, it's like a really fun thing to do. But then I was just like, I've heard that like on Ko-Fi you can't do it.
Nope, no, you can. Okay, just as a PSA, a quick PSA, you cannot do any smut on Ko-Fi. It is not allowed. So if you are doing it, I mean, you're living on borrowed time. Be very careful. I highly recommend that you find a different place to post it, because I have also heard of people who I follow who make very, very good smut, shall we say. They have had, I think they had their either Ko-Fi or their PayPal actually completely like cancelled or something, just because they found out that they did smut on the side. They weren't even using PayPal for the smut, but just because they knew that they were a smut creator, they just removed their account.
That's actually messed up, because it's
so you're not even using their service, but they're just like, just because they know that you make it, they're like, oh, we can't have that kind of dirt here. So like it's really, really difficult now. You have to constantly keep an eye on what's happening. And this is one of the reasons why I find it so difficult to even trying to make like a video that talks about, platforms and stuff, because it's changes all the time. The stuff that, like, even being on Instagram, trying to do anything on Instagram is basically impossible.
It's a nightmare, yeah.
I know of people who make, and this is not even porn, like they make beautiful paintings that just happen to be nude. It's not in any way erotic. It's just bodies. And they've had their account just like restricted several times.
That is so
because
crazy.
because it's seen as obscene. So like that's a whole other thing you have to think about. Like, sure, there is more money in smut, but you then have to become very savvy about how you make that money, because you are never safe anywhere. So yeah. that kind of sucks.
Are you working that right now? Like, what are your platforms, or like, how do you make money through smut without being like restricted or canceled by the platforms?
So basically, at the moment, what I'm doing is just a bunch of work on platforms that are not the usual ones. So I can be found on Mastodon, which is like it's very old internet, and I love it because again, I am probably considered old, but that Mastodon is more open. It's like an open source it's a whole thing. So it doesn't have like one big daddy at the top that basically tells you what you can and cannot do.
It's an open source hole with the big daddy at the top, is what you're telling me? Is that what you just say? Is that what you're saying on our podcast?
Like if
It's funny.
It does not have one big daddy. It has several daddies all over.
Oh.
So like
even better.
There are so many daddies. You just do not. My God, you can't get enough. But yeah, like with Mastodon, it's like a place where I actually feel safe posting my art because I am because of the way it's like set up. Again, if people want to know more, I have an entire video on an artist guide to Mastodon that's like 40 minutes where I go into detail. But that's a really good place for me. I found it very nice, but I also understand that it's not for everyone because it is quite clunky and it doesn't have all of that sort of endless scrolling algorithm stuff that everyone's used to. So that's like one place. I also use Kickstarter a lot because Kickstarter is smut friendly.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I was actually, this was probably many years ago now at this point probably. I was part of like a small group that got invited to a dinner thing at a convention with Kickstarter, and I also got to have a little chat with them like one-on-one after about certain things because I was basically, this is back in 2018. Yes, because basically I remember I was just chatting with them and I was like, hey, so can I just double check with you? Like, are you okay with me doing smut? Like, how do you feel about smut being on your platform? And they like looked me in the eyes and they were like, we are totally fine with smut. Don't worry. And I was like, thank you. That makes me feel a lot better.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so I feel good being there for that. I am also on Patreon, which has been my longest, most stable support. But Patreon is changing stuff. So I am slowly building like a Patreon alternative over on my own website, where it's basically going to be called like a studio. So it's like an alternative. It's going to share everything with my Patreon. So that it's just in case, because this is what I've had to learn the hard way after being like indie for so long. You kind of always have to have an out. You always have to have like a plan B in case the platform you are on suddenly decides it doesn't want you anymore. So like I am never just in one place. I am in several places, but you always have to think about like how many places can you be in one time? Like at one time, you can't stretch yourself too thin because at what point do you just become a marketing machine and not actually an artist? So this is what I was saying, like about like, do you want to make comics for a living? Are you okay with making comics less? Because you're going to be doing a lot more of just marketing and boring shit like accounting. Do you want to do that? Do you want to sit and go through all of your receipts and stuff for your own business? Get an accountant, by the way. Oh my God. Because yeah, you have to think about all of this all of the time. So Patreon has been very friendly.
Oh, that's awesome.
Has been very friendly towards smut. Then they changed. This is a few years ago, and they basically became less friendly. And I heard of people getting their accounts restricted or removed because of smut.
Really?
And then I got an email from them because I was one of the early people who got onto Patreon when they basically just launched. And I got an email basically going, hey, do you want to be part of our smut club? And I was like, no, I don't trust you anymore because you rolled it back before. And now they're apparently yet again rolling back on smut. So certain types of kinks are not okay on Patreon So
Oh
again, here's a quick
no.
PSA for you. That
Wow.
as far as if I recall this, please double check this if you are someone who is listening and you are into making smut comics and you think you're gonna do it on Patreon. Just go and double check their terms of service. But as far as I remember, you are not allowed to do anything that is CNC, which is consensual non-consent. So anything
Mm.
that is of that sort, even if
Mhm.
they have a discussion beforehand in your scene where they're just like, hello, we're two consenting adults having fun times where we are role playing something. We are doing a scene and we are having fun and we both love it very much, looking straight at the camera.
Mhm.
And then there you go and do your scene, in the comics. That's still not allowed.
Sure.
Wow.
So
Mm.
there's a bunch of that kind of stuff now. So you see what I mean about things constantly changing. So
Yeah.
I'm very concerned about putting out a video that goes, yeah, Patreon's great. I love Patreon. And then someone goes, oh, I'm going to set up a Patreon and it's going to be my sole income. And then suddenly they go, by the way, bye.
Oh no.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think that's so interesting that you bring all of that up because that is an added layer for an artist of things to pay attention to. Like, even if you don't draw smut at all and you're trying
Mhm.
to make a living, like you said, you already have to pay attention to all the platforms, you already have to do your accounting, you already have to like market yourself all the time. But now, on top of that, if you're a smut artist, you have to pay attention to the things you can or cannot do and all that. Because I remember Patreon being like asking for the creators to put their IDs and stuff.
Yep. Yeah, that's another thing that they've implemented now because of it's the payment processes at the
Mm-hmm.
very like behind all of this, behind the curtain. It's basically, as far as I've understood it, it's the payment processors being scared because they don't want to be part of anything to do with smut. So as long as they are there going, oh, things are gonna keep changing, sadly.
Oh
We
yeah,
need
that
a
makes sense,
porn
yeah.
bank.
We need a porn bank. We
We need
do.
we need the spank bank to
Can
be
someone
created.
create
The
a spank
spank
bank,
bank.
please?
I mean, if I'm like the devil's advocate here, I can see how like the payment processing people can get scared in case it like tips into really dark stuff.
Yeah,
Obviously,
yeah,
when we're artists, we know what we're making. We're doing things with all adults, and everything is like consensual or whatever. But yeah, I could see how like the banks are all like, oh,
yeah.
you know.
It's a very, very complicated thing that
Hmm.
is constantly being worked on and dealt with by a lot of people who are also way, way smarter than I can ever hope to even be. Like I follow people who are lawyers for like obscenity lawyers. So they literally
Oh,
deal.
interesting. Mm.
Yeah, they literally deal with all of this. And they like just as a quick tangent, like in the UK, again, because the UK is a hilarious country,
Mm.
there was a while back a new law about porn here, which I believe that they have reversed now because the people were just like, what are you doing? Well, basically, they implemented a new law that said that you are not allowed to draw or do any kind of smut that involves spanking in a way that leaves a mark. You're not allowed to sit on anyone's face
Whoa.
and film it. And there was lots of other things as well that you're not allowed to do any kind of caning and anything like that. They had like a long thing. They had like very, very specific things about what kind of fisting and stuff is allowed and stuff. There was like very, very, very interesting
Wow.
about what things were allowed and what weren't. And people were just like, what are you doing? It's just like everything is completely consensual, but because they're trying to figure out what to ban and what not to ban, who do you ask? Because for some people it's going to be very vanilla, like a little bit of a spank. For other people a spank is like, oh,
It's too
that's
much.
horrible, that's
Yeah.
way too much. So like this is really, really difficult to do. So I don't envy people who have to try to figure this
Oh
stuff
my
out.
God! It
I just
reminds
want to draw smut like in peace, but like that's not going to happen.
it reminds me of standards and practices rules in animation, where I just basically think that there's a group of people that are maybe the most perverted people in the world, that whose job it is to sit around and be like, well, he fell in that cake and it's chocolate cake and there's chocolate on his butt and it looks like shit, and so you're not allowed to do that on this cartoon, so you have to change it to a different color, and now it's white and there's white on the crotch. It can't be vanilla cake either. And like
Yeah. Even like the stuff that we got in our Adult Swim shorts where it's like, no pubes, you cannot show any pubes. I was like,
oh, pubes are really bad.
I've had to do a lot of censorship. I have a character who has a dick for a face and he's censored all the time, but he had curly hair on his head, and I've been trying to work out whether I can have, if I change his hair to spiky hair, can it be considered hair and not pubes, or do I have to censor his hair too?
that's so
Oh my
funny.
God. I probably can't draw a willy on here, so I'll just draw like, what do you call it? You don't call it an aubergine, you call it an eggplant. I'll draw an eggplant here.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine.
That's so funny.
Lovely.
I like thinking of all kinds of loopholes, especially for Twitch, like the idea of like a character who has, I don't know, like a gun for a penis and 2 grenades for balls, and that I'm allowed to draw on Twitch, you know.
Well,
it's
anything
funny to
also
think
that's
about
like
the loopholes.
violent. Well, like anything that's violent is fine as well on Twitch, which I find kind of hilarious, because it's like you're allowed to like blow people's heads off, but don't you show a nipple, don't you do it. So like it is quite funny whenever I do stream on Twitch, which also is, by the way, another way that I've learned to get a little bit of side income. It's not a lot, but the amount of, well, it's good for several reasons. It's good because it gives me an opportunity to actually talk to people, because another thing that people might not realize is that when you make comics, it's very lonely.
Yeah.
You sit on your own for so many hours a day. So people might think it's like rock and roll. No, you just sit on your own in a room and you draw until your limbs ache and you have to kind of get off your seat. So Twitch has been a very good way for me to have what I'm calling now like water cooler moments, where I get to have like a couple of hours, or maybe 3 or 4 hours sometimes, where I just have a chat with people and we do a bit of drawing. But let's be honest, a lot of the time we just kind of
it doesn't happen much. Well, one of the reasons why I like Twitch is I feel like there's a certain baggage or expectation that comes with a Patreon or a Ko-Fi, where it feels like when people sign up for it, you need to provide extra things besides what you're working on. Whereas Twitch, it's more like playing a live show or busking or something. Like you're doing the thing right there. You don't owe anybody anything after they give you a sub or donation or cheer.
No,
whatever.
it's all completely like up to them if they want to give you a sub or like a little tip, and it's very appreciated. But like at the end of the day, you're there on the spot. What happens on Twitch tends to hopefully stay on Twitch unless someone clips it. And it's just like a moment where you are there in that like 2 hours and you're just taking a moment to just chill. You can still be drawing and do stuff, but like it is not the same kind of pressure at all. And also it gives people kind of like an insight, I think, at least for me. If it gives people kind of an insight into what I do, and it gives me an excuse to show them like, look, this is the kind of comic stuff I do, and I show them like live, because another thing that I refuse to stop doing is print my comics traditionally. I want my comics to be physical, even though it doesn't really make sense in terms of like, if you think about like how much it costs to post stuff now. But like, it just being able to show them off on Twitch and be like, this is what I do. If you like it, you can get tasters for like free stuff over here and here. If you feel like it, and if you like it even more, you can go to my Patreon or you can go to my Kickstarter. So it's like a really lovely way to literally just talk to people. But you're not at a convention table where you are at work selling. You are there just having a coffee or, you know, a drink. And you're just like having a great time. And you get to like chat to people about stuff, because again, I love talking. And I don't get to talk to anyone because I don't work in a studio with other people. So it's just me and a dog. And he doesn't understand a lot of what I'm saying. And he's old.
Oh, that's so true. And I agree with you. I was thinking about, I don't know if you've noticed that personally, but I started printing my comics as well because I thought, well, you know what? I remembered when I was in high school and the way I found out about Jonan Vasquez, who draws Johnny the homicidal maniac and who was the creator of Invaderism, was a friend of mine, lended me his book. And I was
Oh,
just like, wow,
cool.
I love this. This is so cool. And then later I bought the book because I was like, I love this so much.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of like a way to, you're just lending like books to people in real life as well. And
Right.
then you can just like, hand, and then they can go and buy it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I thought, I don't know if you've noticed like you doing physical books having an impact on maybe people finding out about your work, maybe, or if it's
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And this is what I tend to say as well, like to people who want to make comics, is that like don't just think about the internet, because like this is what has worked for me. Obviously, I don't know what's going to work for other people, but being around somewhere in a physical space and having a physical comic book to show to people does a lot, because it shows them that you can finish something
Mhm.
and it is a real thing that exists and they can hold it and they can look at it. And then, if they buy it, they can then lend it out to their friends. And if their friends like it, they can come back and buy stuff from me. And I believe I've had some people who have literally read some, like their friends bought my work and then they've been like, okay, I'm going to go and see her at the next Comic Con, or I'll just go to her website and buy her stuff. So like it has happened. And I think this is just my bias, okay? But like I feel like holding a physical comic book is so special that I could never, like I can get a taste for certain digital comics, but then I have to stop reading them and buy the physical thing.
Hmm.
This again shows my age. So I started reading Spy Family on the Shonen Jump app,
Yeah.
and then I was
Yeah, I also
like,
like
I
Spy
love
Family.
this. Yeah. I love this. I want to experience this. And again, this is because I'm old. I'm just like, I want to experience this properly. So I went and I and I got the actual manga, and then I sit down with the manga, I put the phone away, and I just read. And I love it. It's just so it's the most amazing thing. And especially the fact when you're doing comics page by page. Another reason why I just love doing them page by page. The way you can direct flow and the way you can like direct the reader when you're doing things with pages is so special to
Hmm.
me. And I
Hmm.
love it when I read certain comic books and they do things in a way where it like ends up like jump scaring you, or it can like
Yeah.
send you into like a trance or something because they're doing like a really slow scene. Manga is amazing for this,
Hmm.
where they're just
Yes.
like doing slow world building and you're there and you're getting really invested, and then you turn the page and it's like boom, you've got like a monster there going, I'm gonna fuck your day up, kid. And you're like, oh god,
I
like it's
re
amazing.
I really think, like, to your point, it's so true. Like, manga is and I don't know if you've read the book written by Araki, the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure guy.
Oh, I have
Oh,
no, I
I
haven't read
love that book.
JoJo's.
It's a good book.
It's
Manga
so
Theory,
good.
I think.
Yeah, manga in theory and practice. And he
Oh
talks exactly
no.
about what you just said, Jenny, where he's like thinking about the page, and I had never thought about pages like this before I read it from him. And it's so true what you
Hmm.
just said. Like thinking about like I think that the thing that's so powerful about comics is when you turn a page, it's like a time lapse a little bit
Yeah.
between those two pages you were just looking at, and then you turn, and then your brain kind of register that you can kind of be in a different space for the next other
Yeah.
two page. And I think like that is so cool.
I'm definitely gonna
Like
have
it
to look that up. But that
And it feels differently
book.
than clicking like either next page or scrolling down, like
Yes.
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
turning the page. Yeah, no, I
Yep.
It
agree.
Hmm.
does. And like if you, and also I love playing with like gutters in comics. So I have like in one of my horror comics, in like the intro page, there is like you open up the page and then like in the gutter you can, if you look, you can see that there is like something standing there, but because it's the gutter of the page you can't quite see it.
Hmm.
So I love
Oh,
that kind of
nice.
stuff. And just like thinking about what happens between the panels and stuff like that, I love as well. Like you can play with time, and the reader takes complete control, really, because once they take your comic book and they sit down and they read it, they can choose if they're just going to speed through it or whether they're going to like take their time with certain pages and stuff like that. So like I love trying to make them slow down for certain things, either to trick them or just because I want them to actually look at a scene, because it took me a while to draw. So I'm just like, you better sit and look at this scene for a bit.
I think another reason why I think that the physical comics thing is so important is I actually think it's going to swing around so that the most appreciated art is going to be physical art at some point. I mean, with AI and not being able to tell what's real and who did what, I actually think that I feel like there's going to be a trend where younger people also are like none of this means anything to me unless I'm like holding it. Like it's all just like.
Well, I feel like when I went to that uni and had a chat with the students, like a lot of students now, at least the ones that I talked to, seem to do both, which is I think is amazing. So a lot of them are just learning how to do traditional drawing and digital.
That's good.
So they can just jump between them. And I think that is such an incredible skill to have. Like I wish, like I am looking at your jam. I'm sorry. I just looked over at the screen. It's amazing. Like being able to do digital drawing like that is so cool. I cannot do that. But the fact that you can just sit and do that is like magic to me. And the fact that like younger people, or no, people who are just wanting to get into comics and stuff, a lot of them can jump between them, and they can also like meld the two, which I think is amazing. So you have people who make traditional comics, they scan them in, and then they like add like digital layers on top, or like they take other traditional layers, they scan those in, and they make like traditional digital layers. I don't know how to explain this, but like just the fact that they are taking traditional mediums and working with them still is so good. And yeah, I do think that they're going to become probably more appreciated now that, you know, all of the AI bollocks is a thing that's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll try to not get too heated about that, because I've already.
No. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, we'll see when the dust settles a little bit in a couple years, because I do feel like right now it's such a hot button issue because it's still like the Wild West. But I feel kind of confident that things are getting looked at by policymakers, and I think people are starting to kind of like look at copyrights and stuff, and I think we're gonna get some regulation. Hopefully it's gonna be strong enough to protect artists, but I think
I hope so. Like I really feel for people who are having to deal with that, like in the workplace.
Oh my god,
because that must be so frustrating, especially if you have someone who's like a boss over you and they are talking about AI as if that's a good thing. Obviously I am, again, incredibly biased against it, but like
Sure.
So like how it's sitting there and being like, oh, this is not a good idea, but you don't really have the power to do anything. That must be very frustrating. So yeah, hopefully it will go away, or be refined in such a way that it's not stealing.
So you're telling me that you don't want to be able to enter all of your comics into a thing and have them make comic pages for you of imitating your work, and then you can put it out.
Yeah, or like anything. Yeah, like just like sitting down and like, why should we even like write a script for comics? Who cares anymore? Why should we do anything? Let's just allow the robots to like do all of the fun shit.
I'm imagining your critiques just being like, that's not even how I would draw a penis. Like,
yeah, come on now.
It keeps censoring all your stuff. Like, stop putting all my stuff behind bushes and like behind different things.
That's so funny.
How dare you? No.
Oh my god.
Well, I think that there's no better transition than this to talk about your grandmother and the comic that you're doing,
Oh, yes. I mean, like drawing tits while talking about my grandmother.
No,
Let's
no.
go.
No.
I'll swap over to draw something else. But yeah, like I was just thinking that the one thing that you can never replicate with a shitty AI is like human experience and things that like you as a person have gone through. That's yours, and only you can draw that. Only you can make that. So like it cannot be replicated by anyone else because they're not you. And the same goes for my granny. Like she went through some shit when we started reading her diaries. Should I tell you like how all this came about before I just start rambling about it?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear
Okay.
it from the start, because this is really why you came on today. But I also think that the rest, giving context for you entering this space is important. So I'm glad we talked about the before.
Yeah. So now that you kind of know, like on the personal level, that like I have just been drawing a whole bunch of made up shit my entire career, and I draw boobs and I draw horror and all that stuff. And then like I also grew up with, I think I mentioned earlier that like I was with my grandmother a lot when I was a kid. She was always really supportive of everything creative. So she was always like, oh yeah, you should totally be drawing. You should totally be doing all this stuff. So I hung out with her a lot because my parents were very busy. They're both, they used to be both steel factory workers in northern Sweden. So I'm like, we kids were like the first ones who actually had like a university degree. So I can understand why they were like, you should not be trying to get a degree in art because you need to be able to actually be useful, because like that's kind of like where they came from. But my grandmother was always like, you should totally do art. You should do it because you're good at it. You've got like, you can see things differently and stuff like that. She was always like super supportive of me. So she is from the very north of Sweden. There is a border town called Övertorneå, which is next to the border of Finland. So if you think of like the Swedish map, it's like, if I'm going to draw it, this is going to look so weird. I'm going to turn this lady into the map. But like literally, if you got like the bottom of Sweden down here, okay?
Wearing a cute map skirt. Where can we buy it?
And it's like goes up here, and then it's like you go this is Norway, and then this is Sweden, and then you have the border here. This turns into Finland. I know this is a horrible map. I'm so sorry. But basically up at the end, like at the very, very south of Sweden, down at the very bottom here of the skirt bellend thing, you've got like, you know, Stockholm, Gothenburg, all of the metropolitan, you know, built up areas that everyone knows about. But you have to go up here to get to where my grandmother's from and where I'm from. Up in the sticks.
The butt of the
We are up in the butt, okay? Literally, we are among the forest. We are among the reindeer. We talk like our accent. If whenever I switch to Swedish, people always kind of go, "Oh my God," because they don't expect my accent, because my British sounds quite posh, I suppose, because British tends to sound posh. So when I switch to Swedish, it sounds trashy because my accent is like, it's like not trailer trash. Well, you know what I mean? Like I'm like from the bushes.
Yeah.
So like, yeah. So basically she is from that very top. Yeah. And so I was very close to her. And then obviously I moved over to the UK when I was 19. We still obviously kept in touch. I would go home once a year, sometimes twice a year, and we would, you know, hang out and stuff like that. So it was all good. But then in 2017, I got a message that she had passed away. She was 94, so she did live a very long time.
That's a long life, yeah.
But yeah, so I got a flight back as quickly as possible to be able to like go through all of her stuff and like help with the funeral and stuff like that. So when we were sorting through all of her belongings, because at this point she lived in an apartment in Luleå, which is like a big, it's not a big city, but it is a city in the north of Sweden. We were basically going through all of her stuff there, and that's when my dad found an entire cupboard that was just absolutely full with diaries from her. And he was just looking at me like, what do I do with this? And I was just like, can we just keep them for now? And I'll just look at them and before we throw them away. because I was just like, don't chuck them, not yet, like just wait. So we've finished like everything at the house, and the thing with my grandmother is that you'd think that she would have just written everything down in diaries, yeah, but she did not. She wrote in everything. So she, very frustratingly, she wrote inside books. She wrote behind photographs. She wrote on receipts. She wrote like on just pieces of paper randomly around the house. Like in the end, she like wrote on the walls even. So like she just could not stop writing. And so I've been going through and saving all of the notes that I've been finding that I thought were interesting. And then when we got back to my parents' house, I sat down again back in 2017, and obviously this is all very raw because like she has just passed away, so everyone's very upset and stuff. And I'm there going, okay, I'm just gonna look at these diaries before we throw them away. Just to make sure that like I'm just it's very weird because it's just like a breach of privacy. Like, should I be looking at these?
Yeah.
But then I am very happy that I did, because there were lots of little things in there that kind of pointed me in. I feel maybe it's wishful thinking, but like I feel like she's kind of okay with me reading them. So I started reading all this stuff, and I am finding out so much shit that I've never known about what she's been going through. And I'm like, oh my God. So all of this time that I've been hanging out with my granny, and she's all like, oh, very lovely. She teaches me about Nordic folklore, about trolls, about tomtar, and all that stuff. And we're all just like having fun and like being out in the woods and stuff. All of that time, there has been stuff that she has gone through that she has never said to me. Some of the stuff she did tell me later on, but there's some stuff in there that she's never said, where it's things where basically during World War II, when it broke out, a border town is going to become quite important suddenly because of, wars. So the Swedish military suddenly just appeared in this border town, and the house of my grandmother was transformed into a field hospital. And suddenly you had like military everywhere. Whoa. And you had like shit going down on the other side, where literally she had photos of how all the like just fires on the other side of the border, because the Sweden and Finland were there's like a lake, like a river, sorry, that separate them. So she could see on the other side of the river how the Nazis were just burning everything, like scorched earth. And suddenly you have like all of these military people coming over. You have refugees coming over the border. You have children without parents, with just like notes around their necks, just saying, hello, my name is so and so. Like, please help me. And she's just there going, oh my fucking God. She didn't say, oh my fucking God, because my granny came from an incredibly religious household, a God-fearing household. She came from a sect called Lestadianer, which this is something that I need to do more research on, which is one of the reasons why I've done this Kickstarter. But they were as far as I know, a offshoot of a Lutheran, hopefully I'm saying this correctly, a Lutheran Christianity thing, where they went far beyond that and were very conservative. No big families, no birth control, no fun things at all, because that's the devil's work.
Wow.
No curtains, because curtains are the devil's trousers.
Wow.
Like wild shit that I did not know at all. So there's loads of that going on. And yeah, so I'm reading all of this. And then I'm also finding out that she went down south, and keep in mind that she was from the north, and just going down south in Sweden is like a huge trek. So she did that on her own, apparently found a man who I have never been told anything about. We don't know anything about him, and she still hasn't mentioned him at all. And all I know is that she got messages back up north to her sisters to basically help her. So they arranged a train or something in the middle of the night from northern Sweden down to the south to come and rescue her and her children, one of them being my dad, obviously, to take them up north again, from this man, and I know nothing about him. He's my grandfather. I don't know who he was. So like I'm finding all of this stuff out, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God. And I haven't even talked about the Nazis.
Oh my gosh.
Like there is content warning, by the way, obviously, but like some of the stuff that I've read in these diaries are people being killed, people being assassinated. I have read about people being, well, my grandmother being seen as good birthing stock for the Nazis. Oh yeah, like lots of eugenics stuff.
Ugh.
My grandmother was pulled out of school. This is something that she told me, and I haven't seen any recollection of that in the diary so far, but she was pulled out of school and had her head measured, and she didn't understand why. And then I have been looking this up later on, and it was actually a thing that was done to the indigenous people up north.
Some eugenics
where they
kind of
would,
stuff.
yeah, eugenics. So they would check your skull.
Oh my God.
Very incel behavior, by the way, where they would just measure your skull and see essentially how white and pure you are and how Aryan you are. So there is so much in these diaries. So just imagine that you've just like lost someone who you thought were your second mother, and then you have like a pile of diaries, and you're looking at them going, holy shit, all of this stuff, I can't just throw these away. I need to do something with this. And then time passes because I am only in Sweden for maybe once a year. And imagine going home to see your family once a year and you're like, sorry, mum and dad, I'm too busy reading about war crimes. I can't talk to you right now. Like, you can't do that.
Oh, no.
So it has taken me 6 years so far to slowly read all of the books that are all done in Swedish old cursive. Fucking kill me.
Yeah.
It's so horrible to read as well. Like it hurts your brain after a while. So I'm doing all of that. And it comes to a point where, again, I'm also just being diagnosed with ADHD. And I'm like, oh, this is why I find it so difficult to organize things. I get so overwhelmed so easily. And I'm getting help with that. And I'm like, okay, this is the time now. I am going to try to do a Kickstarter to ask if people want to essentially be part of this research journey with me, where I have asked, this is why it's been so difficult to do this Kickstarter, because normally I do a Kickstarter and it's like, hey, I have a comic that I've already drawn over on Patreon. I just need it printed. Do you want to chip in some money? And people are just like, yeah. Or, hey, I'm going to draw a bunch of tits. Do you want to see tits? And people go, yes. And it's fine. So like, that's how I've been like earning a lot of money on Kickstarter, and I've been able to sustain myself. And now suddenly I'm here going, hey, so I've got this thing about my real life grandmother and a bunch of Nazi stuff and like religious trauma and stuff. I need to research this and fact check it so that I don't do this wrong.
Yeah.
It's going to take time and money to do. Do you want to help fund that? Also, you'll get a prologue comic where I just get started with it, and you'll get like a slice of life comic from me where I do like a personal diary as we are doing all of this. So you'll get like 2 separate comics that are gonna maybe be combined, but like it's such a difficult thing to essentially ask to people to support, because it's not at all what I've done. I'm all about just doing, you know, fictional stuff. And I don't know how many people, honestly, I don't know how many people care about what happens in northern Sweden. I have a friend who has been doing a little bit of research. Shout out to Midomon, by the way, from the Twitch. They have been doing a lot of research in Finland about what happened during this time. And funnily enough, well, it's not funny, but like it explains things. People don't want to talk about it. People don't really want to know about this time in Sweden as well, because it's very tricky, because you're talking about eugenics, you're talking about a lot of racism and stuff, and we don't really want to sweep that under the rug because we're good, aren't we? We're all lovely, you know, come to Sweden, woo.
That's so
So
interesting because I was gonna ask you, have you looked into grant programs? Because I know when you're describing this project, I know that's the kind of stuff in France that would get all of the grants. Like talking about like all of these like difficult kind of like topics, and it's
mm,
personal. But I don't know how it's like in the UK or Sweden for grants for the arts, because I feel like that would be
I feel like you'd have to
so.
do it in Sweden probably because it's like Swedish
yeah,
history,
so I
right?
think it would probably be quite, first of all, I've never really looked into grants because I've never had to, so I would be very nervous about doing it.
Hmm.
And
Mm,
also because I feel like I have nothing to show yet. I always want to be able to show that I've done something. So
mm.
once I have done this Kickstarter, which has now funded, so it will happen. But
Yay!
like obviously
Yes.
it's still ongoing and it's gonna finish at the end of this month.
So you had
So,
some stretch goals, right? Like,
I have a stretch goal that like literally will allow me to print the comic book. So right now it's all digital and it's all like people get to be part of the journey. You get to come with me as I am doing all the research, doing all the drawing, and I'm literally showing diary comics and stuff. That's kind of the bit I'm doing right now. And at the end of it, people will get a digital comic as a reward. But if we get to £7,500, I would be able to also print it and send it out to people, which would be amazing. So like that's a great like stretch goal that I hope I can reach, but like we'll see. But yeah, with grants, like it is a possibility, but I just want to, well, first of all, I kind of wanted to see if people were interested on Kickstarter first as
sure.
well. Like if this kind of
Mhm.
weird thing is something that people would want from me. And I've got quite a few people who have supported me on Patreon and stuff for a long time who've said then come back and gone, I'm so happy that you're finally doing this. I've been
Hmm.
waiting for so long for you to do this. And I'm
Well,
like, oh my
well,
God.
that's the thing is like you're not just hearing about like a dry history of someone of something. You're hearing about a history that is alongside you finding it out, which is
Yes.
exciting. Like we're able
Mhm.
to be a voyeur, seeing. I mean, it's basically like watching YouTube reaction videos, but
Yes,
but in
exactly.
comic form. You know like we find out like what you found, what secret thing you found on page 79,
Yeah.
and on top of that there's this sort of like story about a person that you're emotionally connected with, and it's this, I mean, it, I don't mean to be crass, but it's like an exciting, like
But
it's
I mean,
dramatic, it's a
It
dramatic
is. It
time,
is.
you know.
And it also feels like hopefully it can allow people to see like the humanity behind doing something like this
Right.
because you literally are being invited into watching being a voyeur, but
mm,
watching me deal with family stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't normally show that. I do all of this like, boobies
mhm.
and things. And this will be the project where like we will I will actually be like showing people a lot more raw stuff. And people seem to be, I mean, I'm very nosy. I'm always interested in people's little like dramas and stuff. So I think like even the little thing that most people didn't know that I had an uncle because I never talked about him for reasons. And now we found out that that uncle had the war album of my grandmother's like war photos.
Whoa.
So I
Okay.
had been literally like so scared to contact him, and it's not like he's not a bad person, he's lovely, but it's there's lots of other stuff going on,
Sure.
okay.
Mm.
And I literally had to have Twitch chat genuinely bully me into sending him a text message to ask him if I could borrow the album because like there is a lot of just personal things that are quite difficult to deal with alongside dealing with this whole thing where you're also trying to not get too I'm trying not to like spill all of my personal emotions all over my grandmother's like biography, I'm
Yeah.
trying to keep that separate so that I don't slather all of my feelings all over her story because obviously I have very strong feelings about all of this. So that's why I wanted to do this separate diary comic where I get an
Mhm.
outlet, I get to show people what I'm discovering as I'm discovering it, And even people have been helping me out already to figure out where photos are taken, where and like what's in old like war photos. So I've sent out some like old World War II photos and gone, hey, hive mind, what's this gun from this soldier? Is this a Swedish gun? Like, is this a Swedish soldier? And then I will get back in like 5 minutes, several nerds just going, yes, that is a so-and-so machine gun from
Oh,
so-and-so.
wow.
And
That
I'm
is
like,
so cool.
yeah,
Mhm.
so it's like a collaborative thing where I'm getting to ask people who are experts on this about this. And actually then I can also go out to real academics and be like, hey, I need some help with this massive herbarium that I have from my great grandmother that has literal botany from like the north of Sweden from the early like 1912 or something. And it's sitting right now in my like in one of my drawers and I don't know how to protect it and I'm scared.
I think it's
So-
like that's why, you know, like I think what's so cool about this project is that it reminds me of Mouse, but in an updated, modern way, because you talk about how you're using the internet, you're reaching out to people in a way that is different from the way Mouse was written, which is a little bit more like, I guess, old school in the research. But I think like this is the stuff of like great projects because, like you said, like it's outside of yourself. You're like personally connected to it, but you're talking about like history and like putting context around what's happening now, because I think like the past always informs the present. And
Yeah, and another thing about Mouse as well is that if I remember correctly, they interviewed their dad, and it was all a lot of like difficulties because obviously their dad is also like a difficult person to deal with. So there's a lot of these frustrations where they're just trying to talk to them about the experiences of World War II while also dealing with the present of their father just being quite like a traumatized person. So you have all of these things as well, where it's just like trying to balance those two. So yeah, I mean it does feel a lot like that. So I'll have to see how I balance it. It's so early days now as well. Like I want to make sure that I do it right and that I treat it with respect, which is another thing too, where it's a lot of lived experience and a lot of serious stuff. And I can't just come in and bulldoze that and be like, yeah, I think it was something like this that maybe happened
Sure.
to some refugees. I don't know. Like I have to go and make sure that I don't say something stupid.
Yeah.
And like there's a lot of stuff as well that you kind of have to then you'd have to take breaks from it, because again, like as someone who is, you know, I'm queer as well, and you read a lot of stuff from that time period and it's very queer and homophobic, and it's a lot of stuff in there that's very anti-woman as well. In particular, there's like a lot of stuff where when my gran became a single parent, like you're basically dirt because how dare you be like divorced? That's not on. How can you be a single woman with like 2 children? Like that makes you kind of like just kind of dirty in a way. So people look at you differently and you have to kind of deal with all of that too. So and that changes you. And I think that one of my main struggles is actually thinking of like the Mouse stuff as well, is I mean, maybe you can think of someone in your life that like you really admire. It's kind of like a hero to you. And then suddenly you get that person's personal diaries. And then like, what if you read something in those diaries that makes you go, oh, that was a bad take? You know, what if you
Yeah.
kind of suddenly
If I
kind of
ever
go,
had
oh,
a
hold on.
granddaughter, I would hate her. Like,
Yeah.
when you read that in the book.
Like,
No.
what if you read that and they would just be like, yeah, by the way, I love, I don't know, something horrible like Trump. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
they say they suddenly start becoming like super racist or something, and then your entire like view of this person kind of shifts. So I also have to balance that where I'm just like heroes are like, you know, it's lovely and simple and like something that you can look up to, but people are flawed and complicated and they are gonna be problematic. No one's perfect. So I'm having to make sure that when I haven't finished reading her diaries, by the way, I'm still going through them. So I don't know. She might turn into some horrible person at the end. I don't know yet. I mean, if you join the Kickstarter, you can find out with me. Yeah.
I think that's amazing though, because I do feel like, so I think it's the Tezuka Award in Japan. It's like a contest or like that you can submit to, and usually they tend to favor stories over like an entire lifetime of a character. And I do believe that is kind of like interesting to think about things this way, where it's like, I feel like with movies and the current state of entertainment, we like to have like a tiny bit of like a character's life, which shows like a snippet of a character. But when you go from like very early days to late life, you get like a much more complex and complete view of like the human experience. And I think there's something kind of beautiful about that, even if there's, like you said, like the person isn't 100% perfect. It's like you can still be inspiring in a positive life force, even with your flaws. And that's really cool to be able to show that in a way that is, like, I don't know, like tasteful, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean that's I'm trying to like figure out still how all of this is going to be packaged at the end.
Yeah.
So that's another reason why it was so difficult to figure out how to do the Kickstarter. So like how do I sell this as a product? Because normally it's just like, hey, I'm just gonna do a comic book. It's a product. It's a thing. You're gonna get a physical comic in the post or just a PDF in your inbox, and everyone's happy. But with this, it's like, I don't even know what this is gonna look like. Like I know that there are bits of her like side where I want to draw them in a different way. So like I've already done a few bits where it's gonna be like off photographs where they're gonna be done with like ink pen and have little spot colors because I'm trying to make people realize that this is in the past. And the most simple way to do that is like, oh, black and white, isn't it? But I also kind of want to try to bring in thinking about like the fires that went on. I want to try to like literally burn pages. I've been burning stuff in the bathtub. So sometimes my husband comes home and he's like, what's that? And I'm like, I'm just burning art. And he's like, okay. So like, so I'm trying to like, I'm trying out different things, but at the same time, I'm trying to make sure that it's also going to come together in a way that it's readable. And I want to make sure that my end of it with my own sort of doodles of my own diaries are different so that you can tell who's speaking. And trying to get my grandmother's voice in there is the most difficult part because I can't just call her and be like, hey, how should I do this line in the comic? Because like I obviously can't. So I'm still struggling with stuff like how do I have her speak in the comic because I can't really ask her. So I'm having to like think about should it be part of it be like a silent comic, a bit like Sean Tan has done some incredible like silent comic work, but I don't know if that's going to be too distant. So all of these things are things that I'm going to be working out as I am reading the diaries. But this is, hopefully you can tell that like this is so different and overwhelming compared to what I normally do. And also like I don't really have like a safety net of like a publisher or anything. So like I'm just hoping that I'm gonna be able to do this, but I'm gonna try real hard because this is like to me, this is like the most important thing I feel like I've done. And if me drawing porn is gonna pay the bills while I'm then doing more of the granny stuff, that is cool. I am all for that. It's also gonna be a great little bit of a break from all of the sadness and trauma. But I just want, this needs to happen one way or another. I am going to make this a thing. And if people want to come along for the journey, I would love them to, because I would love to bounce ideas with people and ask people for their, nerdy knowledge with like World War II and even folklore, because Granny was into that too. So there's loads going on. But yeah, I could just ramble on about this for like literal hours.
I think that is so cool, and that is like definitely, I understand where you're coming from in terms of like the gravitas of that project. Like you don't want to mess it up. It's both like really exciting, but a little bit of it is a little scary as well because you want to do it justice, and
Yes.
that is really, really inspiring. And I think that's the kind of stuff that is definitely like like I can feel your passion, and the passion in it is like really justified because there is so much weight to this, and like you said, like it's something that people don't really want to talk about, and that's all the more reason to talk about it.
Yeah.
That is so cool and inspiring to hear. And I definitely think, like you said, like, like not rushing it in order to do it justice is definitely like the right way to think about it. And it's cool that you can pull all of the knowledge from all the people like you've met on the internet, like on Twitch and everything. It's so cool.
Yeah, I mean, sure, the internet is a bit of a Wild West hellhole at times, but sometimes the internet is just the most beautiful, glorious hive mind of a place where you can just chat to people from all around the world about something, and they have the most amazing knowledge, and you can just like make things work, and it works so much better than me trying to sit here on my own and just going, how do I research all of these guns? And I can just go on, sometimes I can just go on Twitch and I can be like, hey, by the way, so I found this photo of these military men giving out some rations to some refugees. Does anyone know what this box is? And I just put a photo out, and literally one of my Twitch mods found out what kind of box it was. It was Sockerbolaget, which is the sugar company in Sweden. So we literally found out in like 2 seconds that it was sugar rations, and like just little things like that where I was like, how did you do that? I don't understand.
That is
how can you
crazy.
find things? Because to me that doesn't come naturally. Like organizing things doesn't come naturally. I have to really be strict about it. Like as I said, I have to use my bullet journal. It's a whole thing.
Oh, yay. I love bullet journal talks. I am also always trying. I'm constantly on a quest of finding the best system to organize. And I don't
it's
know.
Like a lifelong struggle of like which system is gonna work for me.
Oh my God, I relate to this way too much. And I don't know if you feel this too, but sometimes I'll be really good with like my journal, and I'll be just like to-do list. And I wake up and the first thing I do with my coffee is that I'll just write out all the things I need to do during the day, and I'm planning my week, and then I'll be really good about it for a month or two, and then something happens and then it all falls.
And it just falls off, and then you're like, oh no.
Yeah,
and then you feel bad.
And then you're like a couple like a weeks or like a month in, and you're like, why am I so disorganized? Why am I forgetting everything? And then what happened? It's like, oh, it's the journal. And like, it's like the cycle never stops. It like, I don't know, it's really funny.
Well, I highly recommend physical bullet journals for anyone who might like struggle with organizing. At least for me, I have to, because it's very annoying. I've tried digital organizing for years, and I can't seem to do it because it doesn't it doesn't feel real. I need to write it down with my hands. Which takes time and is annoying, but like that's the only way it sticks. So I have found out the way to do it. It's just to do it all by hand, and I have to make it like pretty for me. Like I have like an entire section of just like special lovely colors for my bullet journal, because if I don't make it like gay, then I won't use it. It's so frustrating. I'm almost 40 years old and I have to like use like pretty colors because otherwise I won't use the thing, and it's just how I work. It's so annoying.
Well, dude, I relate to this so much.
I feel like there's a way to sort of tie this into our question that we normally ask our guests about creative block, because I feel like this is a different type of creative block where it's not necessarily that you can't come up with ideas. It's that you try to be organized and conquer your mind a little bit with these organizational tools. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about some of your strategies about either working through creative block or using just staying organized to sort of work through your own mind and the troubles you have getting things done.
Yeah, so I mean, again, one of the problems that I have just made for myself is doing this for my job means that also if I don't produce work on a monthly basis, I don't get paid. So I've set it up on my Patreon that literally I get paid per page, so that if I don't produce anything, my patrons don't get charged. So I think very early on, I had to just steamroll through any kind of block just out of sheer fear that I was just like, if you don't make something now, anything, you can't pay your electricity bill. And then you're screwed. So like, I feel like I have a different struggle with the creative block where I will have times where I do not feel as passionate about making things. And then I'll feel guilty that I'm just like, look, but you should feel passionate at all times. You must. And then it's just like, no. It's taken me time to kind of understand that that's not how it works. It kind of comes in ebbs and flows, and you have to be understanding with yourself about that. Just because you're having a down doesn't mean that it's not going to go up again. So I think having some kindness towards myself has helped a lot with that. But I just have to work through it. And the main thing that I'm keeping in mind at all times is like, are you going to work yourself into another burnout? And is this going to be the one that makes you stop doing this? Is it worth it? Like, check yourself at all times. Like, are you forcing yourself to draw now to the point where you are going to fall out of love with comics for a long time? If so, we need to start thinking about other things. So I'm having to try to, like, I never stop working. So I have creative blocks, but I just work through them. And that's not always a good thing. Like, my problem is that I am a workaholic to the point where it has been very detrimental to many parts of my life. So, and it's also probably one of the reasons why I've been able to make a living, because I don't stop working. But like, so for me, trying to work through the blocks is literally taking a break. I have now learned that, like, for me to be able to do things, I have to walk away from it. I can't force through it. So I will, even short things like going for a walk. Having a dog has been one of the best things ever. If you want like any tip, get a dog if you can, because like
then you can write it off on your taxes.
Exactly, it's a work expense. But yeah, so you can literally, like, at that point, it forces you to have a routine, because you have to feed your dog. You have to make sure that the dog gets to walk out and go out for meals. What am I saying? I don't take him to a restaurant. Go out for walks.
Fancy.
My fancy dog. Yeah, so like literally having a dog forced me into a routine that made me really like a lot healthier. Because things like leaving the house, going out and seeing people, taking a break from things has really allowed me to continue doing the work. Because a little while back, last year I had like quite a big health problem that, wouldn't you know it, I worked through by making a comic book about it, because apparently I'm insane. But like, I literally made a horror comic about it called Blood. If anyone wants to read it, you can. Just be warned that it is the grossest one I've done. So yeah, so with that, it was just like making sure that when I have these blocks, that like I try to always remember why I'm doing this in the first place, and like remembering to like just stop for a little bit. And when I started doing this comic about my health problems, I was like, are you doing this just to make something, to keep going, to keep the ball rolling at all times out of fear? Or are you doing this because it helps you on a personal level? Like, I had to have that conversation with myself. And it turns out that like literally drawing out like the traumas essentially that I was going through some medical trauma stuff. Like drawing that out was really helpful to me. So doing that helped, but had like at that point there were certain things I just couldn't draw, so certain other projects just kind of they had to be put on the back burner because I was like, I can't, but physically I probably can draw genitals right now, but I'm not going to be able to give you good work when I am not in the mood in any way to draw porn. So like it's about taking a break and figuring out how to organize yourself, and for me, physically stepping away. I have to physically move away from the computer because otherwise this hand will not stop working. It will not stop. It's like a motor that's constantly going, just like my mouth. So
this is, I think, the first time that we've ever had a creative block issue where the solution potentially is trying to figure out a way to become turned on. I think that's our first guess that where a part of their comics is like I can't make my stuff. Sorry, I'm not in the mood,
I
dude.
Can't. Like luckily my backers for genitals were very understanding because I was like, look guys, I'm literally having surgery on my ovaries. I'm having open surgery to remove a cyst that's as large as like a 4-month pregnancy. I don't feel, it's been a lot. I don't feel like drawing smut right now because there's a lot going on down there and I can't be around that area. So and luckily like they were understanding, and like that means that my comic is now delayed, but I made that conscious decision because I was like, I am not going to put out good work for these people. The work is going to be forced and it's going to be shit because I am not feeling it at all. And the thing with smut comics is that, like, at least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but like you need to like, they are some of the most honest comics that you will ever find out in the world. I am always very proud of anyone who makes smut because it is so scary to show your yum out to the world and potentially have them, be icked out. Like I always say to people on Twitch that don't go and look at my work if in case like some of the content warnings give you the ick, because I do not want you to feel in any way uncomfortable with what I'm drawing. If it makes you feel icky, like, or bad, please, it's not, don't look at it. Like, it's not for you. It's because kink is very revealing and, in more ways than one.
Yeah, and I think, like it's very, in some kind of a sort of way, I could kind of link it to comedy where it's like very personal. It shows a lot of what you think as a person is interesting, what is worth like making fun of, or like what is worth kind of like exploring like sexually. And I think these are definitely, I link it to comedy because we've had guests in the past who have said on the pod, like, if I'm depressed, I can't write a joke. And I'm like, yeah. It's kind of the same for what you're saying.
Exactly.
Like,
you can't force that kind of stuff out. It doesn't work. Or if you do it, it's just gonna be bad.
Yeah.
And like, do you really want to put something that terrible out? Like, I don't. Unless I am desperate and I really, really, really need to pay my bills, in which case I will put out whatever.
Well, one thing I was curious about is most people that I know that do smut comics work under an alias, and I was curious about what was behind your decision to go with your name.
Oh, I love the fact that you brought this up. Thank you so
much. Because I personally, I work under an alias. Like when I first started making animated cartoons, I knew I was going to be making offensive stuff to some people, and so I did all my work under an alias for like 10 plus years now. I've been doing it.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good decision. It all depends on like what you want to do and how you feel about certain things. So if, for example, you are someone who wants to work in a more traditional industry, so if you want to get into animation, or if you want to get into, maybe book publishing with like, the publishers that also deal with like kids literature and stuff like that, even though everyone is an adult and we understand that just because you draw smut doesn't mean that you also don't have like other interests in the world. Like you're not just a one track kind of person. People are still kind of weirded out about it. So it can close doors for you professionally if you use your real name, because they're going to be like, yeah, well, if we Google your name, porn's going to come up, even if it's drawn. So like, do you really want to risk that? So like, one thing is that I always tell people is like, if you're going to use your real name, like just be aware that certain doors may close on you. So it depends on what you want to do with your career. And also another thing as well is that another reason to use an alias or whatever is that it does protect you as a person against the internet, which can be brutal. So for example, if you're like bringing out your smut work, it can be, people have weird kinks. So people are then going to connect those drawings to like your face. No, thank you. So having like a pseudonym then protects you and your feelings in a way, because no one knows who's drawing that kind of cowgirl filth with milking. Like nobody knows. It's fine. So like with all of these like things, why on earth would you not just use an alias? Well, I am very lucky that first of all, my parents and like my family are very liberal. Like they know what I draw and they don't care. It's like my parents are just like, hey, if it earns you the money, go for it. Like they don't care. I personally as well don't really I don't feel like I want to have a different name for this, because like I don't really need to, like, my goal is not to get into traditional work environments. I am very happy being independent and working on my own. It seems to be working for me so far, touch wood. And so I've been fine with that. So I never really felt the need to make an alias. Now, having said that, I also have a pseudonym. I also have a different name.
Okay.
Yeah, that I work under, that I will not tell you, obviously, where I put out more drawn work that is a bit more out there. Not a lot more out there, but a little bit more.
There's levels to this iceberg. I love it. Okay.
So like I have that, and I do that on the side, and it's like I'm testing certain things out and just doing that purely for fun and seeing how I like certain things. And if certain things kind of work out, then I might bring some of it into my future, like genital stories and stuff. But like, yeah, you can do both. Like you can have your own name if you want to, and you can also have an alias. But yeah, I would definitely say that like if you are thinking of making smut comics and you want to get into certain industries, you might want to use another name for it. It just never occurred to me. And also I was just like, Genitals is such a funny name.
No, it rules.
It's a good,
yeah.
And like, shout out to my friend Lee, who was the one who came up with it. So, because I was just like, that's such a good pun. Do you want Jen's genitals? Yeah, of course you do. Yeah, I have to go with that. So yeah, that's the reason I did it. But yeah, it does, like, having an alias does protect you as well on a emotional level, I feel, from criticism and things. So if you can be a little bit more true to yourself. And another thing as well that I will add is that, again, just a PSA for anyone out there who buys smut comics from people, please don't send them weird DMs propositioning them, and please don't come up to their tables at Comic Cons and start asking them if they are the ones in the scenes in the comic books and trying to suss out what kind of kinks the actual creator has. Don't come behind the table and start touching the creator, giving them a back massage. Do you see where I'm going with this? Like, I know of quite a few comic book artists who want to make spice, but they are literally scared of doing it because they've seen how other spice creators are treated. Yeah. So they have seen how some of the comments I've gotten, they've seen how how sometimes, very rarely, thankfully, especially since my husband started standing next to me at Comic Cons, like, people don't seem to actually be trying anything. But like, yes, they've seen how especially like femme presenting people in comics are treated. If you draw anything sexual, some people immediately think that you're just up for it, and they just think that they can come up to you and start talking to you about anything like they know you, which is really uncomfortable when you're just there going, look, just because I draw like monster fucking doesn't mean that I suddenly want to have a chat with a stranger about their weird tentacle fetish. Like, by the way, I love tentacles. It's not weird, but you know what I mean? It's just like, and you don't want people to just start dumping that kind of stuff on you.
Yeah.
It's so true. Like what you're saying about being femme presenting. It's so, and I had like this funny thought, like, you know how like back in the days when it was like mostly just dudes in these Comic Cons, like they would like hire booth babes to kind of bring in people to. Now you have to do the opposite. You have to bring up like your booth bodyguard. Your booth.
I have my booth beard. Literally, it's my husband. He has a beard, and he is there. So yeah, it's like that
so
now.
Funny.
It's just amazing though, because you see this. I've also noticed it, especially also online, because you know there's a level of anonymity there where people, if they see your face, this is another thing. If you don't use a pseudonym, you use your real name, and they see your face on a Twitch stream, for example, so they know who you are now, and then they find out that you draw porn. Some people just don't know how to handle that. They're like, oh my god, she's an actual woman and she draws porn. I didn't think women liked porn. And then they just kind of lose their minds because something breaks inside of them, and they just kind of start asking you really weird, inappropriate things, or they just like, you just lose their shit basically. So like I've had to deal with a lot of that where I'm just like, yes, I like smut. Yes, I draw it. Yes, I'm doing that for fun. Yes.
How
and like
often
you have to have these conversations over and over again. It's just like, yeah, yes, women exist. Women like comic books. Yes, women draw comic books. Yes.
How often do you have to turn down commission requests that are weird? Do you get a lot?
Luckily, not very often, because I don't really have. My commissions haven't been open for a long time. They were open for a little bit, and would you believe it? Like the moment you are professional with people and you're like, my commissions are open, this is how it works, the time wasters do not show up in your DMs. You would be surprised how the actual people who are, you know, really into kink, and this goes for anything to do with like smut in general, the people who are active in the communities are the most respectful people and the most like aware people, like of like boundaries and like, you know, trigger warnings, content warnings, all of that. They are the people who know all that stuff, and they are so good to talk to because they just get it. Like if you're just going like, oh, by the way, yeah, I enjoy like a bit of the BDSM stuff, and they're just like, oh, cool, and then we can just have a chat about it, and it's not just like oh my god, it's a woman and she likes to be spunked. Oh, you know, like it's not like they're just like finding out about sex for the first time. It's just like someone just being like, oh, cool, yeah, me too.
Well,
And then you can just have like an actual conversation about it, which is lovely.
the interesting
So I haven't
thing...
had any real weirdos, by the way, in like actually asking for work. I do have people in my DMs wanting to do things to me, but I'm just like, sorry, I'm not personally for sale. This I draw stuff. You can't personally dom me.
I think it's incredibly interesting that like a lot of that community, I think, subverts expectations a little bit in the way that, like, in some ways, people that are genuinely in that community are super mature about sex, and like to the point where like they write contracts, they have like several meetings where they talk about very openly about how they interact with each other and what rules they're comfortable with and things like that. And so I'm glad that you're getting more of that crowd than people like dipping their toes in and being like, you know, like...
Yeah. Well, I think also a lot of the time when people try shit with me, they can be surprised when I just kind of go, yeah, and? Like, I don't... Because after a while, you just kind of go, look, I've heard stuff, okay? Like, you're not going to shock me. Like, you coming into my DMs and being like, oh, yeah, you like a little bit of this and that. I'm just like, okay, like... goodbye. Like you don't even like
Yeah, yeah,
reply.
yeah.
You just kind of just block and it's fine. You just move on. So like it also comes to a point where I think people get the vibe, especially on Twitch as well, because I always brief my moderators about like certain things so that they're very aware of what level of, as we say here in the UK, banter that I am comfortable with. Like I am fine having a bit of banter with people. It's all good fun. But like if people get weird and start trying to get personal information out of me and being like,
Oh,
can
yeah.
we see where you live? Can we see
Oh
what
no.
yeah, and like can
Yeah.
we see your collection of this and that? And I'm just like, that's where I'm just like, nope. No, that's too far. But like
Yeah.
but you kind of learn this a little bit with it's just like by doing this for a while, you kind of get more used to it. And also, I hope that people who interact with people who make smut then learn from that and go, okay, wait, then they're just people? Oh, wow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like a big deal. Because I hope that in the future, maybe this can just become like not that big of a deal. That would be
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah, right.
It's just part of like being human, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, I agree. I think that is very true. And I think that's a really noble goal as well. I think about that a lot as well because I'm like, you gotta look like sometimes, like, I don't know, like in the animal kingdom or whatever, like everybody loves to bring up like bonobos and how like they have sex all the time and it's fine. And it's like, you know what I mean? And it's like for some reason we're people and like for us it's like such a big deal. But
Yeah.
no, yeah, it's like I don't know. It's I mean, well, we all know where it stems from. But
Oh yeah. Which makes the whole like when you're reading the grand diaries about like a really hardcore like religion that's just going,
Yeah.
no, any sex bad unless it is for children, blah blah blah. Like reading that is also such a mind fuck because then you're just going, oh my God, they were so repressed. Oh,
Mhm.
so like that's another level of it when you are personally quite liberal and then reading about all of these things that again, just my biases here. Like, I feel like that can't make you happy. That must be so difficult to have to deal with all of these rules and all of this like shame all the time. Because a lot of it has to do with like shame and confessing all of your sins and your shame. And it's
Yeah.
all about suffering.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it doesn't have to be. Like, liking certain things doesn't have to be about like it doesn't have to be suffering. It's just fine. Like you're okay. And even for people, it goes the other way around as well. For people who don't like smut, for people who just like people who might be asexual as well, who just don't like, don't really fancy the whole sex stuff. That's also on another level. They have to deal with
Yeah.
people just going, "How do you not?" And then it's
Yeah,
just like,
which is
oh,
such a double standard, right?
yeah.
It's so
Right.
crazy. This is so interesting, and I want to talk about this for hours. However, want to get to some questions from our listeners because we have some really good ones.
Oh, okay.
Where do you
Are
live? And can you show me your collection
Can we see
of...
your porn collection?
This is like kind of like a complete opposite from like what we were just talking about, but I think it's a great question from our patron Crass. He asks, "Is there any point that you cried while reading your grandmother's diary?"
Oh my God. At all, like
At
I
all
would
times.
all times. Like I have to take breaks when I read it because I become so overwhelmed by emotion. And I'm
Mm,
also personally an incredibly emotional like person. So it doesn't take a lot for me. You'll see like all of my emotions are very clearly displayed on my face at all times. If I am in any way upset, I can't hide it. So I had a moment on Twitch as well where they were bullying me to, contact my uncle. And
mm.
then we thought we got a message from him live. And I just burst into tears on stream. And I try not to do that kind of shit normally, but like it's so overwhelming to me, all of this stuff, that like I can't help it. And especially my grandmother stuff, when you're reading about her struggles, because I haven't even mentioned all of her mental health struggles. Because, like, imagine not being able to talk to anyone because mental health is not a real thing. It's not seen as a real thing at that time, especially like up in the north, in the sticks. like mental health just wasn't a thing. You know, it's
Yeah.
a sin and that. So if you're feeling low or if you're having any kind of problems, you just better shut up about that, because otherwise, you know, people are going to think you're mad. So I've read stuff from her where she's just clearly not having a good time and she can't talk to anyone about it. And you have these moments when you're just like, I wish I could just talk to her as an adult and be like, it's going to be okay. Like, you can talk to me. But so all of that stuff has been really difficult. And just reading about stuff that she talked about, you know, around stuff to do with the war, is reading about the children, the orphans coming over from Finland who came, a lot of them came like, you know, completely on their own, and they were just put on like a train in Sweden to go to foster families. This is a whole thing. So just reading about like terrified children during wartime, while their villages are like being burned down by the Nazis, just coming over the borders without their parents, it's just like, oh.
Yeah.
So like another thing that I believe Granny told me while she was showing me the album was that one of the things that they did was that they would go from village to village. This is something I need to research, by the way, so it's just what my granny told me. But they would go from village to village and they would burn everything to the ground. So scorched earth tactics, yeah? And they would take the cattle and they would kill the cattle and throw them into the wells. So not only are you killing the food and, you know,
The water.
you're also poisoning the water. So you're completely destroying their entire lives, basically. So because obviously up there as well, like my granny had, they were part of like a farm, and you had your cows and you needed them. So imagine just having everything burnt down and all of your like pets and your cattle are just slaughtered and thrown into the wells. Like that's horrible to read. And you're sitting there going, ooh. And then your nieces and nephews come in and they're like young kids and they're like, oh, hello, auntie. Do you want to go and play, like, I don't know, Pokemon? And I'm there going, oh, I just read about Nazis murdering people. Ooh.
Yeah,
like,
that's tough. Yeah, it's
really
wow.
harsh. So yes, I do. Sorry, that was me rambling a lot, but yes, I do cry all the time, which is why I need to take breaks, because otherwise it's too much for me.
I've been watching the movie Sisu. Have you heard about that movie?
I've heard about it, but can you? What is it?
It's I believe it's about that period in time where it's sort of like the Nazis were already losing the war, and they were and as they were leaving, was it Finland? They were just burning everything. It's about
yes, I've been told to watch that.
It's about a Finnish ex-commando that he was up there alone after having like left the army, and he was known as like some sort of ghost. Like it was almost like a legend about him.
Yeah.
About like they would send him into the woods and he was like a one-man army kind of thing. And it's basically a revenge story about these Nazis that stumble across him, and while he struck gold, and him tracking them down. And it's very satisfying if you like those kind of movies. But
I'm definitely gonna have to watch it.
But I think it's about a similar point in time that you're talking about, I think.
Yeah, that sounds like it is, because it is at the end when they are losing, so that's when they kind of start doing the whole like retreating as well, because Finland then basically go, hey, we don't really want to be buddies with you anymore. So they just kind of turn on them, and the Nazis are just kind of going, what the hell?
Oh my God, that is so crazy.
And apparently the troops got like really pissed because they were like, I thought we were friends. And then they're like, no, we're not. Okay, well, we're just going to completely ruin all of your shit then. So yeah, it's rough. It's rough, man.
Wow. Our patron Kay asks, I know it's interesting to get that question because you kind of brought that up a little bit during the interview, but we can get your point of view on your current point of view right now on this question, which is, how does one parse heavy personal narratives and traumas for an audience perspective, keeping the meaningful intact while not revealing or potentially opening one's own wounds for the creative process?
Well, very difficult, because again, this is going to be my first time that I'm doing this, so I'm having to I have to be very, very careful with how I'm approaching it. So I have to make sure that I am not, this is one of the reasons why I actually split my comic into two, because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to get too emotionally overwhelmed by everything, and essentially like I suppose in a way traumatized by it. So I wanted to make sure that I could keep that in like my own personal space in the diary, and then I can then have my granny's words and her story feel more like her thing, if that makes sense. It's quite difficult because like you have to also keep in mind that a lot of the people you are talking about and you are trying to like tell the story of, a lot of them have just passed away now. So it's gonna be a lot of careful treading around real people's lives, and they are not here anymore, and you have to be respectful of that, and respectful of like also maybe their relatives who might still be around. If they come across the comic book, you have to make sure that they don't feel that you have done something, you know, potentially quite traumatizing to their family by showing all of these things. So it's a lot of balancing that I'm going to have to try to figure out. But like I am highly aware of it. And just reading all of this made me aware just by the fact that I was just crying a lot, and like I had nightmares and stuff. It was a lot that I was just like, okay, I am gonna have to take this comic very slow. I'm gonna have to do it part-time, and I'm gonna have to get outside perspectives on this, because if I sit with this on my own, this is gonna become very hard to do. And also, I'm not sure I can do a good job if I just sit and stew in all of this stuff on my own and get like it. Yeah, I think it's just going to be a big emotional mess. So I think, yeah, just stepping away and getting other people's perspectives and having a healthy boundary between like yourself and the work, while being incredibly careful and fact checking everything. Also, actually, another thing that I'm still in the work, I'm trying to figure out is, you know, in Mouse, they kind of made it all, I don't want to say more palatable, but like it was a conscious decision to make, you know, them into mice, and, you know, the Nazis like into like cats and stuff like that. Like, so they literally made them into different animals, and it kind of made it a bit more anonymous in a way. I'm trying to figure out how to tell the story for real with real people, but like, should I show their faces, or should I not? Like, these are things I'm having to figure out. Like with my granny, I can show her face because like that's fine, but I'm having to figure out like how much can I or should I share about our relatives or other people in the village. Like, if I can, I'm gonna go and get permission from people. So I am planning to go to certain family members and literally talk to them and ask them for permission. I haven't even told you about like literally one of my great uncles is a survivor from Auschwitz.
Oh,
And
wow.
literally, yeah, so he drove one of the likbilar, the trucks with all the dead bodies. I'm sorry, I don't know what it's called, but it's basically, yeah, he drove those and he never spoke about it. So I've only found out about that through text. And then you have to be like, can I show that? So I don't know. You have to kind of figure out how to ask for permission too. That was a very rambly answer, but hopefully that's okay.
No, that's great to have all the examples with that. I know we've kind of touched on that in the interview, but let's try to see if we can get your quick little summary to answer our audience member, a special raptor on Instagram. They asked, if it has not been discussed already, how do you keep yourself afloat economically as an indie creator and comic artist?
I need to make that video, man. I need to make that video.
Yeah, they say, as a fellow Swede who is considering a path into comics, I would love to know.
Oh, fellow Swede, let's go. Okay, so again, before I tell you all of these things, just I have to always give this disclaimer because I feel very nervous about giving people advice on things because I don't know you and I don't know your circumstances. So keep in mind that this is just stuff that's worked for me, but I'll give you like a little quick bullet list on how I have made it work so far, okay? Okay, so the way that I have survived so far in comic books is by just the fact that I am in the UK, so I don't have any health insurance, like I mentioned. I don't drive, I don't have any kids. So think about all the things that in your life that costs money. I have been able to live quite quite frugally, but I was still splashing out on cash and all that kind of stuff. But I'm quite frugal. I don't have a lot of expenses, which is good. Also, I work all the time. So that's another reason why I think I'm okay making comics, because it's all I fucking do. I have an online presence and I am very, very active on places that have worked for me. So I'm active on Twitch because I love talking and I love showing art being made. And that way I get people who, you know, pledge money like to Kickstarters through Twitch, or they just like give me subscriptions and stuff through that. So that's a little side income. I have a long running income from Patreon where I get paid per page. So I create comic books page per page, and my patrons get to see each page as it is completed. So that's what they pay for. And at the very, very end of a comic book being completed, that comic is then put over onto Kickstarter to be printed. That's like the main way that I make a living. So the patrons help me make the comic and they get to come along as I make the comic. And then we get it printed through Kickstarter. The other way is that I have a shop, but now it's going to be moved away from Wix. So I have a shop. So I sell a lot of stuff. All of my stock is in the room I am currently sitting in. It's all printed, and I go and I post everything myself at my local post office. This is all a one-woman job. I do commissions sometimes if I open them up, very rarely. So that can be like an extra little income. I go to Comic Cons and I go to local like art fairs, book fairs, any kind of local market that fits your niche. So I go to smut fairs and I sell my comics. So it's not even a comic fair, it's just for smut. And I know of people who go to horror conventions and they bring their horror comics and people go, oh my God, horror comics. So like you go to all of these physical spaces, yeah? And finally, I have started putting my work very recently onto a platform called Global Comics, which I am very impressed with so far. So over there, you can essentially set like a super fan base price where they get to see everything like a few days before, whatever you want. And you can sell your work for, you know, whatever you set it as. Like you can sell PDFs on there, or you can have web comics on there. They are very supportive of, you know, scrolling web comics and all that stuff. I have got my first payout from them, so they work. And
nice.
I'm very, very happy with them. So as you can see, it's a lot of juggling an online presence, finding the platform that works for you. For me, the platforms that currently work are Patreon, Twitch, Kickstarter, and I am also on Mastodon, where I'm getting so much work because I think it's just the crowd on Mastodon is kind of my crowd. Again, probably because I am going into my 40s and I do retro art. So people kind of go, yeah, look at her. She does like the old stuff. So yeah, it's all about finding the platforms that work for you, have an online presence, like a website, make sure that you have a way to get paid. So like have your own shop, or also set up like a Ko-fi or something like that, so that you have a place where people can just chuck you, a few dollars or something. It's about making it as easy as possible for people to support you and to see your stuff. But yeah, that's the short version, okay? If you want to know more, I'm going to make a separate video about how I do smut comics and trying to sell smut on the internet, because that's a whole different fuckfest.
Yeah, you're doing art on hard mode?
Yeah. Yes, I'm doing that. That is definitely doing art on hard mode in more ways than one.
We have a challenge, Sean. We have a challenge that a Special Raptor asked us to do. I copied and pasted in the Zoom chat, something in Swedish. And we have to try to read it. And we have to see if Jenny can understand us trying to read it.
Oh, no!
Okay. Do you want to...
This is your test now.
It's my test. I have never spoken any Swedish, so I'm gonna try. Sjosuka. Sjosmen. Skutus. Sustiosu. Skuna.
score.
Oh,
Try reading it, Sean.
Human scoutles.
Oh, this person has done you so dirty.
Skona. Skotskatsker.
Book.
Oh, can you do you know how to wait, hold on. Maybe I can I copy and paste this
is it on
into
your
the chat?
Instagram?
Here, let me see.
It's in the Zoom chat. Oh, on the Instagram.
Hold on, I'm
Here,
looking on
no,
Instagram,
here. I'm also pasting it onto page 5 of the Jamboard.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
It's like if you want to go on.
That's exactly what. This person has done you so dirty.
Oh,
Do you know what? You know what they've done?
What have they done?
They have given you a Swedish tongue twister.
I knew it was going to be a tongue twister because there was so many repetitive syllables, and I was like, I know what
this one. Even I am gonna struggle. Okay, I'm gonna switch over to Swedish for a second, so I apologize for everyone else who don't speak this chicken language. Okej, jag ska försöka säga det här nu till dig. Vad det nu hette, jag vet inte. Okej, nu kör vi. 7 sjösjuka sjömän sköttes av 77 sköna sjuksköterskor.
Wow! We had it perfectly. That's exactly what we said.
Yeah, that's exactly what you said. You sound like you're having trouble.
Well, you could say that. What does it mean?
So 7 sjösjuka sjömän is 7 seasick seamen sköttes av 77 sköna sjuksköterskor were taken care of by 77 pretty nurses.
That's so
funny. There you go.
That is
they
so
were
funny.
Very, very naughty doing that one for you.
I love it. That's great.
And I do think that it's funny that the person put semen in there for just for you.
Semen.
Oh, thank you.
My gosh.
I appreciate it so much. Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. Jenny.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I wish this episode could go on many hours, but I think we're gonna have to make it the end of this creative block. Jenny, thanks for being our guest and sharing your story.
Thank you for having me. It's been amazing. I've really enjoyed this, and thank you for setting this up in a way that you can have me as a traditional artist trying to do this, because I've been looking at your jams on the side, and they are just incredible.
Oh, thank you so much. Real quick, shout out the name of your project, where we can find you. I'm also gonna write it on the Jamboard on the last page here. But
yeah, so the name of the project is Farmor Stina, which translates to grandmother Stina, which was her name, and it's on Kickstarter right now. And I have my own name on Kickstarter, so it's just Jennie Gyllblad. So if you can just search for Farmor Stina, or you can search for literally my name on Kickstarter, and you will find it. And yeah, it's gonna happen. It is a thing. It will happen. And if you would like to be part of the journey, I would love for you to be part of it. You can come along with us as we draw all of the difficult things, but there were also lots of joyful things that I didn't mention because we were so stuck on talking about the other stuff. But her creativity and a lot of the Nordic folklore that we didn't really speak about. So if you're into that kind of stuff about, I essentially pagan beliefs up north, if you're into that sort of thing and you want to know more about that,
if you like
there
tapestries.
will be more about that too. Tapestry art, yeah, my grandmother was an incredible tapestry artist. If you want to see more of her art as well, definitely come along. If you want to see some more cultural things from the north about how they dress, and I have my own folk dress that I wear for the Kickstarter video, so you can see that as well if you want to see how northern Swedish people dress for certain events. So yeah, we would love to have you over there if you wanted to. If you wanted to support it, I would be very, very happy.
And what is the end date of your Kickstarter here?
Is it
Thursday, May
23rd?
Okay. So I believe we're going to try to get this episode out before that finishes. So if you're listening right now, head over there and check it out. And I also want to thank our listeners, of course. Follow us on social media at CRTV Block, where we ask for drawing prompts and questions to ask our guests to interact. Huge thanks to our editor Clemens for editing the podcast, Marco for helping us produce the show, and Abuka for creating the short clips that we've been putting out.
If you love our show, you can support us on Patreon. Becoming a patron gets you early access to interviews and access to our Discord community. Another great way you can support us is by commenting, liking, sharing, following. All of these things help us get more, game the algorithm, puts the content in front of more people, and the more we grow, the more we can support ourselves. Click the link in the description of this episode to follow Jennie's socials and to check out her Kickstarter. I've been your host, V.
And I was Sean. Keep being creative, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.